How much is a year of life in prison worth if you are factually innocent? Let's discuss that. Hi, folks. Tony DeWitt again with another video on the law. Remember, I don't dispense legal advice here, and this is what we're talking about today. So, before we actually get to the discussion of the issue that I raised in the intro there, I want to tell you why I didn't make a video yesterday. It has some tragically comedy elements to it that I think you might find interesting. A couple of years ago, my wife wanted an electric vehicle because she thought that all she really does is go back and forth to work and pick up the grandchildren. And, you don't need to go out of town. Maybe an EV would be a good thing to do. So we bought a Kia EV6. Now, it's a nice car. I won't lie to you. It cost a lot more than I would have paid for it, other than the fact that it was brand new and you couldn't get them. So when one turned up, we paid what they were asking for it for. For the most part, the first 2.5 years of having that thing have been absolutely wonderful. But in October of last year, we had an issue with the vehicle where it stopped being able to be charged. We would put it on our charger at home and it did nothing. And we couldn't figure out what the problem was. We took it to Kia and they couldn't figure out what the problem was. They had the car for 6 weeks with each different set of diagnostics recommended by the people in Seoul, Korea to diagnose the problem, not fixing the issue. Finally, they decided to put in the part that I told them they needed to put in at the beginning, and that fixed the problem, or at least that's what we thought. Yesterday, with the car's HV battery, the high voltage battery, charged at 72%, the car just stopped, halfway in and halfway out of the garage. We couldn't lock the doors. We couldn't change it to neutral so we could push it in the garage or push it out of the garage. That thing was deader than a doornail. So we called the roadside assistance that Kia offers. They came, picked it up, took it to the Kia dealer. And of course, the Kia dealer says, we got a bunch of cars waiting in line. It's not fair for you to jump to the front of it. I said, yeah, but it's also not fair that you guys had this thing for 6 weeks and we still have problems. So they finally announced today that they had it fixed. But yesterday, we only had one vehicle and my wife had to pick up the children from school. So I wound up having to work longer at the office and I just didn't get to making the video. But I thought about you guys all day, and when I came home, I was just simply too tired to make a video and make it something that you would enjoy watching. It would probably been more like, "Okay, here's what I'm talking about today," which I don't think anybody wants. So at any rate, that's the explanation. Hopefully everybody finds that satisfactory, and if not, tell me I'm a jerk and we'll be fine. So, the question again is how much is a year in prison for a crime you did not commit actually worth? Suppose for a minute you have one of those faces. You often get called by the wrong name. People go, "Hey, Sid." "Hey, my name's not Sid, I'm Steve." And they look at you kind of funny and go, "Oh, I'm sorry," and walk away. All right. Or someone asks you if you work at the Quick Trip or at the Burger King because you have a face that they've seen there, or you have a face like someone that they've seen there. You get used to that kind of thing. And then one day, to use the words taken from a song, a big bellied sheriff comes to you and asks you why you did it. Why did you rob that bank or assault that person? You patiently explain that you've never been to the location where this crime took place, that you work pretty much every day, and at the time they claim you were doing the robbery, you were probably at work. But as fate would have it, investigation reveals that that was one of the few days you took off, and you took your boat out on the lake alone and went fishing. Fact is, you don't have an alibi. Now, the woman who says you assaulted her identified you. The neighbor from next door who saw the assault identified you. They identified a red pickup truck as your vehicle, and indeed you own such a truck. Your public defender urges you to take a plea, but you refuse and it goes to trial. A jury convicts you on the basis of the eyewitness testimony. But you never stop fighting for your innocence, and after 6 years in prison, a DNA test proves that it was not you that was involved, and that evidence had been kept from your public defender and found not to, because it found not to match you. So for the 6 years that you sat in prison, someone told you what you could eat. They told you when you could eat. They told you when you could sleep. They told you what you could watch on television. They told you when you could go outside for exercise. And maybe you've gotten into a couple of scraps with other inmates, maybe lost a tooth or two. You've been disciplined by guards for failing to snitch on other prisoners. Your life for this last 6 years has literally been kind of a living hell. You're 2 credits away from your bachelor's degree when you were jailed, and you've not been able to complete your degree. Your job prospects aren't good. Once you get out, you can probably get a decent job at $65,000 a year if you can complete your degree. But that will be at least 6 months, and you're going to need money to pay the tuition to finish your degree. And as a result, you find out that your state has a statute that permits you to file a claim for compensation for wrongful conviction. The question is, what's your claim worth? And can you qualify? Under your state's law, you have to be found factually innocent. Well, given that the DNA didn't match, that should not be hard. Now, 6 years times $65,000, that's something like $360,000 or more. And there's a lot of pain and suffering and emotional torment for the loss of freedom. And the fact that in spite of doing nothing wrong, you still are going to show up as a suspect anytime there's an assault of that nature. That ought to be worth something. But your state has a flat amount that they pay per year, no more than $5,000 per year. And no matter how much pain and how much suffering you endured over the 6 years, they have a cap on the total amount of compensation at $25,000. Was that fair? Is that fair? And then you look to the state to the west of you. There's a guy in that state by the name of Ichabod who likely committed a murder 6 years ago, but prosecutors withheld potentially exculpatory evidence, and a federal court released Ichabod on habeas corpus. The state decided not to try him since several of the witnesses were unlocatable. He files for compensation under that state statute, and he gets a ton of money. His state does not require a showing of factual innocence, and it's a good thing because the guy's probably guilty of the crime, but he nevertheless skates on it because the state can't make its case. He gets $1.5 million from the state. So, how can this disproportionate compensation of wrongfully convicted individuals be fair? And of course, the answer is that it can't be. As draconian as my hypothetical situation above is, Wisconsin, in fact, limits total compensation under its program to $25,000. And that is the case whether you've served 1 year, 5 years, 25 years, whatever, you get a $25,000 check. That's the maximum you can get unless the legislature overrules the commission that makes those decisions. Now, think about it. You're starting over after having every decision made for you for the last several years, and now you get handed $24,000. All of that's taxable income. And you have to find a place to live and a job and live on that $24,000 until you can readjust to society. It's barbaric and it's also internally disproportionate. Because according to Wisconsin Watch, Daryl Holloway in 2022 received $1 million plus $100,000 in attorney's fees for 24 years he spent wrongfully convicted of assault charges. He was freed by DNA evidence, but in spite of this, he continued with his criminal behavior, being arrested and convicted of theft after being released from custody. In spite of this, in 2023, the legislature approved the $1 million award, Just 2 years later, Derek Sanders was awarded the state maximum of $25,000 for 26 years that he spent in prison. Sanders had twice pleaded no contest to the charges for which he was convicted, and it was an ineffective assistance of counsel claim that ultimately got him out of prison. It would appear that Wisconsin and its Claims Compensation Board isn't strictly following the requirement that a wrongfully convicted person prove innocence. This because both Holloway and Sanders were recidivists. Apparently, the quantum of evidence to establish innocence varies in Wisconsin, and that should never be the case. Again, there is so much of a discrepancy between the states. There is an article that I'm going to link in the show notes down below that will show you essentially what all of the different states do in this regard. It's on on a website called Wisconsin Watch, and I think it's literally an expose on Wisconsin's unfair system as well as the way other states have reacted to compensating people who never should have been in jail. I would also point out that lawyers are not much help in this claims compensation area, although they might be needed to negotiate the system and provide proof in those cases where there is a need to prove factual innocence. Those lawyers, of course, will expect to get paid. This isn't the work of public defenders. As good as they sometimes are, they don't do this kind of work. You need private attorneys, and they bill by the hour. On the positive side of this, the wrongful conviction of individuals in federal court usually results in an award of $50,000 per year with no cap. Nationally, reentry programs where convicts and those acquitted or released are taught life skills, job skills, and other things that help them readjust to a new reality. Most of those are run by churches or non governmental organizations, not by the state itself. As a result, the opportunities afforded to released offenders and those who did not offend but were wrongly convicted, they vary a great deal. It's one area where we need federal legislation to mandate what services ought to be given to released offenders. There really needs to be a way to ensure that people don't have to reoffend in order to be taken care of. Now, while some offenders would likely always go back to a life of crime, in an upcoming video, I talk about Pennsylvania, where the recidivism rate is 64% of the people who are convicted and released from prison. On release from prison, 64% of them reoffend. That's a pretty enormous recidivism rate. And moreover, we can't just count on luck to beat the justice system. At least some of them would be much more interested in staying out of jail if they had the resources, if they had the skills and the training necessary to get a decent job when they got out. When you're turned out of jail with just a few dollars in your pocket and what you had on when you were arrested, your options are pretty limited. I've linked the Wisconsin Watch article in the notes below for those who want to look at that information. This might be something for those of you who are interested. You might want to write to your state legislator and ask them, what is it we do in the state for people who are wrongfully convicted? And what resources do we provide prisoners when they get out of prison so that they don't reoffend? Those are important questions we ought to be asking all of our legislators. At any rate, that's what I have for you today. Thank you so much for being here. Come on back and join me back here at the beach tomorrow. Thanks for watching my video. If you have a request for me to cover a topic, please send me an email to the address above, and in the subject line put video request. If you have comments, drop them in the comments down below. If you found the content worthy, please consider subscribing. Since I started doing this work, I have always asked listeners to consider doing just one kind thing every day to make somebody else smile or make their life better in some way. Please consider doing that. It makes the world a better place. Now, YouTube has some suggestions for other videos of mine you may find interesting.